What is going on, guys? Josh Betar here for From the Stands. I am back from Perth. As you can tell, if you can't, I am quite sick. It was a big week. Yeah, the week got the best of me. Obviously, we were there. From the Stands was there, live coverage all week. If you haven't already, go have a look. Got some great interviews, a couple with DC, John Anik, and the rest. I mean, there was a great sit down. About a 10 or 12 minute sit down with Coach Mornay Visser, head coach of One Drickus Duplessis. I'm just going to do a bit of a recap overall of the week and basically the fights on the night. There were some great fights. So we'll kick it off from the bottom. Obviously, Stuart Nicoll succumbing to Jesus Aguilar in his UFC debut. Now, look, there was a lot of comments on it on our page, on the Instagram, just online and in general on Twitter as well about Stewie, in this fight, calling him trash. I think that's pretty harsh on the guy who just made his UFC debut. And for what it's worth, he was looking good in the early stages. Yeah, it was only a 2 minute fight, but his scrambles looked good. His distance control looked good. He looked like he does. He looked like he belonged in the UFC. I mean, and Jesus Aguilar is no punk for your first UFC fight. You know what I mean? Let's be honest. I think Stewie did well for what it was worth. Obviously, maybe he pounced on the back a little early, got caught, obviously slipped off, and then Jesus capitalized on it, which credit to Jesus for that. You know, I think Stewie will be back, and you look at a teammate of his, Tom Nolan, who I'll get to in a second, came out, lost his UFC debut. Now he's 2-1 in the UFC. So I do think there is something to be said for guys losing their UFC debut. I think it does light a fire within them, and it remains to be seen. Sort of what Stewie can do, and I am looking forward to seeing him back. I think he's a good talent, and it's a shame he didn't get to showcase all of his skills in that fight. But it's the fighting game. I know he knows it better than anyone. These things do happen, so obviously, congrats to Jesus Aguilar and a great fight. And obviously, I think Stu Nick will be back. He's a talented kid, and I think he'll be very, very motivated with a loss. Moving on, Song Kanong obviously defeating Rick Glenn in a great fight. Song looked pretty dominant. Rick had his moments. I think I saw a post fight. Song Kanong called out Li Jingliang. I don't know if that fight gets made. Don't mind the fight. Um, but nothing to blow your hair back with. I mean, obviously, Song Kanon getting a decision after 3 rounds wasn't a bad fight. Um, Tom Nolan. Now, I've been singing this kid's praises for years, and it's for a good reason. Um, he lost his first fight in the UFC. Yes, came out, got stopped by Nicholas Motta, and I think it was one of the best things that could have happened to him. And I've told this to him to his face that I think that was one of the best things that happened to him was to lose that first fight. Um, you come in as such a highly touted prospect. You come in with so much hype, and sometimes you may make mistakes when you may have not had you not have that hype because maybe you're overlooking things, those sort of things. But I do think Tom is a future top five, if not future UFC lightweight champion. I will hold that, and I will sing that until it remains to be otherwise, proven otherwise. The kid's 23 years old. He's 23. He's now 2-1 in the UFC. He's had 4 fights inside of a calendar year. It is pretty remarkable what this kid is doing. Now, people can sit there and say, well, look at someone like Muhammad Mahayev. He's only 21, 22. Macy Barber was quite young when she entered the UFC. John Jones was champion by 23, I believe, 24. So, people may say, what's the difference with Tom? Tom is so incredibly sharp and he's getting better each fight. He is getting better each fight. He didn't rush things this fight. You look at the last fight against Victor Martinez, even the finish towards that end. Some may have said he looked like he tried to rush that finish. Not at all this time. He had Reyes hurt multiple times, and I think he showed great composure. That was one of the things I wanted to ask him after his fight was how he manages to stay so composed and how he's being able to, how he's, sort of learnt that because he hasn't had that in previous fights. He is a killer and he will always look for the finish. But his composure and he seems a lot more calm in the fire now. Obviously, he likes that firefight, but he definitely looked better in this fight. And I think that's one thing we have to remember, guys, is that he is improving every single fight. He is young. He is 23. Give this kid 5 years. In 5 years' time, he's 27, and he's still not even in his prime. Look at Dustin Poirier. He's 35 and still fighting for the lightweight title. This kid has a long, long, long future in the UFC. Obviously beating Alex Reyes by unanimous decision. He wanted to finish. I know he did, but I think the 3 rounds was good for him. I think it was good for his fight IQ. It was good for his gas tank. All good things to just for him to know to test himself. He already knows, but it's a different animal in the UFC. So very happy for Tom. Obviously getting a big win. His first time fighting in front of a big crowd, not at the UFC Apex. Obviously, he had his last 3 fights, including the Dana White's Contender Series fight, all at the UFC. So very happy for Tom. Yeah, you heard it here first. If you haven't heard it somewhere else, you've heard it here first. Keep your eyes on Tom Nolan. I think he'll be a pay-per-view staple here in Australia moving forward. I think he'll be, there's rumors of a Sydney card in February. I think you'd most likely see him on that. I don't think he will be returning for the rest of the year. I think he'll be sort of laying low and I know he's got a few injuries, so look after those injuries and return fresh next year and look for a big 2025 from Tom Nolan. Moving on, Casey O'Neill defeating Lamana Santos. Great win for Casey. Obviously needed this win. It had been 2.5 years since Casey O'Neill had won a fight in the UFC. Obviously, she had the knee injury after the Roxanne Modafferi win. But that was her last win. I think it was February or March of 2022. So, needed this win. A lot of pressure on her, a lot of pressure on the shoulders, and she came through. So very, very happy for Casey. Obviously a great talent. This is her first camp away from Extreme Couture, so it remains to be seen what she can do elsewhere. But I mean, for what it's worth, she looked good. I think she looked good. Um, very happy for her that she picked up that win. I can imagine that, I spoke to her post fight and, she said it was hard, dealing with the doubters and she's working with a psychiatrist now on those sort of things. So obviously she's been through a lot. So to see her come through the other side is very pleasing. So very happy for Casey in that regard. Um, Josh Coulibaly succumbing to Ricardo Ramos, which I believe, and I think the majority of fans believe that Josh Coulibaly won that fight. My only critique is I would have liked to have seen Josh stand Ricardo up in that first round when Ricardo was sort of laying on his back and he had he hurt him. His leg kicks were tough. First or second round, whichever it was, when he had Ricardo hurt and Ricardo didn't want to get up. It's one of those things, this was a big fight for Joshy. He needed the win. He's now 0-3 in his last 3. It's a tough one. I think he's going to be sticking around in the UFC. This kid is fun. He's a lovely human being. One of the salt of the earth. This guy, and he brings crowd reaction too. The crowd loves Josh Coulibaly. Hell, who doesn't? I mean, the guy is a fun fighter. He gets through that control that Ricardo had in that first round. Nearly submitted him. Eyes going. He looked like he was in deep, deep trouble and pulled through the other side. Made it through that round, made it all 3 rounds, and only lost a split decision. So I think the guy is as tough as they come. He is a stud. I think he will. I think we'll see more of Josh Coulibaly in the UFC. Credit to Ricardo, I guess getting the win. However, I scored it. I scored it to Josh Coulibaly, and I think the stats reflect that as well. You look at the stats from the fight, um, and uh, and they're very much in Josh's favor. Junior Tafa, Volta Walker. I thought, you know, bit of a weird ending. I think if you're gonna scream out in pain, I think that warrants a verbal submission. Obviously Junior wasn't happy with it. Yeah, tough one. I like Junior. I like the tougher boys. I think they're very fun, entertaining heavyweights. It's just tough. It is a very tough one. Tough situation, obviously. Walter got him in the heel hook and Tafa's screamed out in pain. It is hard to scream out in pain and then turn around and say, "Oh no, I'm all good." Continue the fight. So it's a tough one. I like Junior though, and I hope he comes back. He will come back. Stronger obviously had the tough, uh, short, short notice fight. He can't get any more short notice than that when he fought I guess DeLima back in February in Anaheim. So I think Junior Tough will be back. He's a fun heavyweight. UFC loves him. Fans love him. So he isn't going anywhere. Last one before I forget, because it isn't on the list here, is Jack Jenkins. Obviously a wonderful, wonderful win over Herbert Burns. Just destructive. The kid is immaculate. He looked awesome, 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 awesome upon his return. So very happy for Jack. Obviously, leg kicks just destructive. The kid has tree trunk legs, and is looking to return. Hopefully in Edmonton. Maybe sooner, maybe later. Who knows? But Jack Jenkins definitely a kid to keep your eye on as well. Obviously, a bit. He's 30, so a little long in the tooth for the featherweight for how many fights he's had in the UFC, but still has a big future nonetheless. I think with some dominant finishes in his next few fights, don't be surprised if he is in the UFC top 15. But very happy for Jack. Obviously, a lot of doubters as well after his last fight. So very happy for him, and it looks good to see what comes from this. First fight on the main card: Carlos Prates defeating Li Jingliang. Man, Carlos Prates looked awesome, absolutely awesome for a guy that smokes after his fights. He is unreal. Defeating Li Jingliang by KO TKO in the second round, just destructive. This kid is unbelievable. I mean, if you didn't see the fight, go back and watch because it was just something else. Um, just fluid striking, punches coming from all angles. I mean, the way he folded Li Jingliang like a lawn chair was pretty incredible. So hats off to Carlos. Carlos, I think he's a contender in that division. I think he's your dark horse. Give him a year and see where he's at, and check back in a year, and I think you'll find him in the top 15 somewhere. Jairzinho Rosenstro defeating Tai Tuivasa by decision. Man, it's a tough one for Tai. I love Tai. Everyone does. Yeah, can you not love Tai? He's a fun fan favorite, but it is getting tough. I mean, he's now five losses in a row. It's tough. This one obviously didn't get finished, but I mean, yeah, what do you do with Ty? You can't have him fight at the Apex because he's tied to Ivasa. Um, it's really tough. Obviously losses to Volkov, Marcin Tybura, Sergey Pavlovich, Cyril Gahn, and now Jairzinho Rosenstruck. Yeah, it's a tough one. It's tough. He really needs a win. He really needs a win, and it's one of those things where after the fight against Alexander Volkov, Dana's still saying his praises that he's always a fighter that's going to come in and give it his all. But at this stage, we need to start looking at maybe a matchup to get him back in the win column. Obviously, Jairzinho Rosenstruck, great kickboxer, but maybe we give Ty one of these younger heavyweights just to sort of get him back on track, get his confidence back. Obviously, he's training back in Dubai now, so a lot of factors there. I want to see Ty back. I love Ty. He's one of the good guys in the sport. Brings a lot of energy, brings a lot of fans. So definitely want to see Ty back in a winning fashion. I just think a matchup. He's still young. He's still young. That's the thing people don't give credit for. He's still young, so he's still got a lot of time in the sport, especially at heavyweight as well. So hats off to Jairzinho Rosenstruck. Obviously, a great performance from him. Where he goes next, he talked about it post fight. He's sort of at the stage where a couple more wins, and he's looking at these rematches that he's had on route to a potential title shot. So, yeah, we'll see how we go with Jairzinho. But congrats to him, Dan Hooker, Mateus Gamrot. Dan Hooker is the man. God damn, how do you not love Dan Hooker? What that guy did was incredible. Hats off to Mateus as well. Sorry, I'm still sick. Hats off to Mateus. He looked great as well, but Dan is just a killer. And this tattooed up Dan Hooker is something else. So hats off to Dan Hooker, man. That dude's back in the top five. He's one big win or two good wins at lightweight. And he's back in a title shot. it's insane. It's the first time he's been back in the top five in since 2020. Um, and I saw a stat this morning. You look at his, when he fought Michael Chandler and Chandler knocked him out. Chandler got the title shot. Since that fight, Chandler is 1-2 or 1-3, and Hooker is 4-2. Hooker's fifth ranked and Chandler's sixth ranked. So, man, hats off to Dan Hooker, man. He is still doing the damn thing. Um, I don't think that the decision was controversial at all. I think he won that fight fair and square. And man, I guess 34, 35 is the prime for a lightweight because he's only 34. Look at Islam, Poirier, Gaethje, all these guys that, are your staples at lightweight. These guys are coming into their own and winning titles, winning interim titles, they always do these sort of things later in their career. So hats off to Dan Hooker, man. One of the good guys in the sport. Just signed a new deal. Been in the UFC 10 years, still here, still doing the damn thing. So credit to Dan Hooker, man. One of the good guys. How can you not love him? Into the co-main event, KaraFrance defeating Steve Erceg by a round one KO. Unfortunate for Steve. It's no stranger. I'm close to their team, the management team, and Steve, and overall, all those guys. And I love Steve. I think he's one of the nicest guys in the sport. He does nothing extraordinary as a person. He's just himself, and people love that. So, um, but man, KaraFrance looked good. He looked good, and with a win like that over a guy who's just challenged for the title, how can you not give KaraFrance the next title shot? I think that is a more impressive performance. Now, you've got Kai Asakura fighting Brandon Royval. If he knocks out Brandon Royval, he has a claim to the title. But I think at the moment where we stand, KaraFrance is the next number one contender. Has to be. He just knocked out Steve Erceg. Steve Erceg just fought for the title, and some people, including myself, thought Steve won that fight. Had he not, gone for that takedown in the last round. So I do think Kai should fight for the title next. Where Steve goes from here, I think you could give Steve the loser of Kai versus Brandon Royval. I believe that's in October. Don't quote me, but I believe it's in October, sometime mid-October. I think that'd be a fun fight. Kai Asakura or Brandon Royval, whoever loses that fight, Steve Erceg, think that's a great fight. Why not do it in Sydney in February? I think that'd be fantastic. You've also got Brandon Moreno still out there. Maybe Steve Erceg, Brandon Moreno. He's been calling for that fight for a while. So there's many options there for Steve, and he's not done. I think he is always going to be, I think, one of those guys that's one or two big wins away from a title shot. He'll be right back in there. But man, credit to Kai KaraFrance. Definitely very, very, very impressive. And on to the last one, the main event, Dricus du Plessis and Israel Adesanya. Man, everyone wants to keep doubting Dricus, huh? You want to keep doubting Dricus? I mean, I stopped doubting him a long time ago. After the Darren Till fight, I stopped doubting him. I mean, how can you doubt the dude? He is just a dog. He is a dog. He has people say they got that dog in him. That dude has a 70 kilo pit bull inside of his chest. That dude is just non-stop. He was up 2-1 on the scorecards leading into that fourth round. People seem to think, watching that that fight live. I had Dricus round one. Some people had Izzy round one. It was a very, very close fight. I think all fight until the finish. Dricus had moments. Izzy definitely had his moments. Dricus said like he was never really hurt in this post-fight press conference. He said was never really hurt or affected by Izzy's punches. So, he was able to sort of stay through the onslaught of Izzy. But Dricus is the middleweight champion for a reason. And I think we have to start respecting him for that. Like that dude is the only man to defeat Rob Whittaker, Sean Strickland, and Israel Adesanya ever. Ever. The dude is legit. He's the middleweight champion. And he is 30 years old. He's got another 5 years, I think 5, 6, 7 years if he moves up to light heavyweight. Alex Pereira's 37. So, speaking with his coach, Mornay Visser, early last week, That interview is still on our YouTube channel. Go check that out if you haven't already. Mornay talks about that Dricus will move up to light heavyweight and potentially he could be a lightish heavyweight. By lightish, I don't mean a light heavyweight. I mean a lighter heavyweight. You know, someone who's around that 230, 235, 240, maybe 220 mark. So he will eventually move up. You know, he was a welterweight once upon a time. Now he's a middleweight. He's going to continue to move. So man, credit to Dricus. Coach Morne Visser is definitely in conversation for Coach of the Year. At this point in time, he's my Coach of the Year. How can he not be your Coach of the Year? The dude is what he's done is incredible. So hats off to Dricus. Hats off to Team CIT Performance Institute in South Africa. Um, Credit to him, man, because South Africa, like Australia, you got to think of it like this, guys. Like Australia was once upon a time a destination where the UFC wasn't coming that regularly. You know, we were building, but we were never a regular hotspot. But now South Africa has that chance. So, you know, they've got a champion in Dricus Du Plessis. They're going to, the UFC has said, yep, we've earmarked UFC South Africa. So credit to those guys. Credit to Dricus Du Plessis. Credit to his whole team, Mornay, Hanny, the whole crew. Lovely, lovely bunch of guys. And yeah, the best in the world. He's the best middleweight on planet Earth. And, you know, obviously the Sean Strickland fight is next, and it will be interesting to see how that fight plays out. Sean had the cut in the first fight. How does this fight play out a second time with a Sean Strickland that isn't cut? Sean said that really affected him. So it remains to be seen. And I can't wait to see that fight. I can't wait to see that fight. And if Rob Whittaker defeats Hamzat Chimaev in October, do not be surprised if Rob Whittaker somehow either leapfrogs or gets the winner in February in Sydney. That would be phenomenal. Rob Whittaker's title fight in his hometown, home state. I mean, you couldn't write a better script. And for Israel Adesanya, it's a tough one. I mean, who really knows who he's going to fight next? I proposed a fight directly afterwards. Now he has the same management company with Tim Simpson and Chosen Advisory. So let's see how let's see how that would play out. But I think Yuri Prohashka talked about a potential move to middleweight, and he was going to watch and see how this fight played out between Dricus and Israel. And now that it has played out, man, can you imagine Israel Adesanya versus Yuri Prohashka at middleweight? That is a great fight. That is a fantastic fight. That's an all-time classic. Those dudes are warriors. Um, yeah, I don't know who else you put him in front of though. I don't know who else Israel fights at middleweight. Um, Hamzat loses, maybe a Hamzat. Hamzat wins, maybe Hamzat. I know the UFC wants to give Hamzat Chimaev a title shot, but what about a world where it's Izzy and Hamzat next? Maybe we finally get that fight. Izzy wants big fights. He wants to test his skills as a mixed martial artist. Sign me up for Izzy and Hamzat. Sign me up. That is a great fight. Um, if Hamzat's healthy. But I don't think Hamzat should get a title shot if he beats Rob. I think Rob will beat Hamzat. I just think Rob's on a different level right now. Hamzat hasn't fought in a year. He's fought twice in 2 years, so his activity level hasn't been the greatest. It's a 5-round co-main event fight. That favors Rob. So let's see how that plays out. But I think Israel, Chimaev, Israel, Yuri. I think we got to let the next 4 or 5 months play out in the division, and then we can sort of start looking at what's next for Izzy. I think though a fight with Hamza or a fight with Yuri, if I'm a fan, that's what I'm wanting. Man, Hamza Chimaev and Israel Adesanya would be just a fantastic fight. That's a pay-per-view style fight, and I think everyone knows it. That is a great fight. Um, but man, the whole week was fantastic overall. Thank you for everyone that's tuned in, subscribed. Um, Obviously hit the big 1,000, so we're monetized now. So big thank you to you guys for that. But yeah, a great week, great fight night actually. A really good pay-per-view, big fight feel with Dricus and Izzy in there. It was a really big fight feel. It was a one that made you nervous, that made you anxious to see the fight and see how it would play out. So a great card overall. The Aussies did well. I think in Sydney in February. You've heard it here first. No. I think we'll see some big fights on that card also. Expect to see your Tom Nolans on that card. I think see your Steve Erceg on that card. Obviously only 6 months away, so perfect time for a lot of those guys to return. But for me, Thank you guys for tuning in. I apologize for my voice. Obviously, a big week in Perth, late nights, a lot of editing, so it gets the best of you. But thank you guys for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Yeah, a few more interviews coming over the next week or two. So stay tuned for those. All right, guys. Till next time. Peace.